Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving a praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakha, Kwadash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostles of Great Millstone, and in our respect to the brothers that they're pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, I just want to do a quick lesson on the topic of famine again, right? As I promised, I will be going into this for the remainder of the week. The last time I went through the topic, I mainly focused on how, I introduced the topic and how farmers are facing tough times. And I also highlighted how, you had these government officials making promises to these farmers, but in the end, these promises, when you examine it, you find out that it's an insult, right? It doesn't help them. It only costs them more, and when it costs them more, the government takes that money that they've spent and they circle that money right back to them. So their situation doesn't really improve. That was a topic, but this time I'm gonna pretty much go into a specific topic, be as specific as possible, because like I said, one of them was economic pressures, right, which this topic is going to fall under, and it's not going to fall under climate or environmental factors, but it's also going to fall under political instability, right? So political instability and economic pressure for farmers. And very soon, this image that you see here is going to make sense to you. Before we begin the article, this is the book of Revelation, chapter 6, beginning with verse 5. It says, when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see, thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And this is, of course, dealing with famine, okay? When you go into the word, a pair of balances, a pair of balances is pretty much talking about a yoke. The word there is yoke, right? Which on one hand it can mean captivity, but on the other hand it can mean a pair of balances, right? And so following the context, it deals with the focus heavy is famine, right? So right, so we know that famine is destined upon this place, along with all the other judgments that were unveiled when the seals were open. I just wanted to bring that out, just so we are in the spirit. We are reminded that what we do is that we're not just bringing out data and, petitioning for people to go out there and, freaking write letters or suggestions to their government officials. This is just, prophets, right, sounding an alarm in the holy mountain of Zion. We're letting it be known that the judgment of the Lord is upon this place. And we're showing how vulnerable the system is. Babylon like to parade around and, through the spirit, they say, I sit as a queen and I am a widow. Let me see. What did I say? Yeah, let me yeah, Revelations 18:7, it says, How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow, right? They like to boast about how much of a great country they are and how much the system works, and they make it seem as though they are, um, untouchable, or at least are immune to all the misfortunes in the world. But when you do your due diligence and you look at it, right, not even you don't even need a spiritual eye, but when you do your job, uh, you find out that this place is very vulnerable, right? And so when we preach about the judgment of the Lord, like famine, we know that it's inevitable and the Most High is capable of bringing it upon this place. Okay, so again, keep an eye on this. We're going to circle back on it. Now, there are a lot of articles that talks about it, right? I have two articles here. I'm not going to, read all of it. I'm going to have it summarized, but these are the titles that if you want to read for yourself, go ahead and get into it. So, um, this article references this video, right, that was made. Um, it's unlisted. Yo, I don't know why they have it as unlisted, uh, but it touches on the issues of farming. And again, you have government officials making promises as to how they're going to fix the situation. And the article here talks about how things are so bad that if they really cared about farmers, they would have fixed this. They would have fixed it already. And as a matter of fact, they've made things worse than they were before, right? Um, like as you see here, they say additional labor cost increased 47% since 2020, and this is what we're gonna talk about, right? How has labor cost increased since for 47% since 2020, and the reason being the the reason is the adverse effect wage rate, and it is the minimum wage that the United States Department of Labor has determined must be offered and paid to U.S. and alien workers by agricultural employees of non-immigrant H-2A visa agricultural workers, right? So the Department of Labor, they have set up this thing called the Adverse Effect Wage Rate, which is the AEWR. And pretty much they mandate a certain amount of money that has to be paid out to farm workers. They make sure that aliens and non-immigrants and United States citizens get paid the same amount so that farm people who own farms are not discouraged, right, from hiring US and only hiring foreign foreign or immigrant workers who are willing to work for less, and that will cut off job opportunities for Americans. So this seems to be done in with good intentions for the Americans. But when you go, it says that the article says that there's been a big change, right? So what is this change, right? We're not gonna, again, we're just gonna go into the articles, skip over these data, and I'm gonna have AI, Google's Gemini, explain it. And this tool is very effective, right? And you know, um, I do encourage brothers to use it to the best of their abilities. It's a great companion, and you can just like get a lot done with AI, right? Because they push it on the left hand side, we'll push it on the right hand side, right? They go harder, we go harder. They evolve, we evolve. Okay, it says until the chip. That one we don't go near that. Or the implants, the brain implants. It says the core issue is a new rule. So I copied and pasted this article, and now it's breaking it down. It says the core issue is a new rule that changed how the adverse effect wage rate is calculated. The AEWR is the minimum wage farmers must pay H-2A workers to ensure their pay doesn't negatively affect wages for U.S. workers. In simple terms, the Department of Labor changed the formula, and now farmers have to pay higher wages for many of their seasonal employees. How the old school system worked. In the past, the H-2A wage was usually calculated using one simple rate based on the Farm Labor Survey, and this single rate covered almost all farm jobs. The new rule, however, creates a two-tiered system that makes labor costs spike and introduce huge uncertainties. The first is splitting the jobs. Farmers are now required to have a detailed, you know, job descriptions for everything that goes on the farm, right? So the first one here is splitting the job. Instead of using one rate for all farm jobs, the Department of Labor now requires a farmer to break down jobs into specific categories, which is called the Standard Occupational Classification or SOC codes. The highest rate rule, right? That's one thing that they introduced. They also brought up another thing called the highest rate rule, which is that if an employee performs multiple tasks that falls into different categories, the farmer must pay the highest wage rate associated with any of those tasks for all hours work. So, a real world example is what's called the shuttle driver problem. A typical farm worker picking apples, for example, used to be paid a standard lower FLS rate, which is $14.99 an hour, $15 an hour. Under the new rule, if the same worker is required to drive a van for a small part of the day to bring other workers from housing to the field, that driving task is categorized as shuttle driver, which has a much higher rate, like almost $20 an hour, $19.50. And because of those two things, if that farmer had just been picking apples, he would have just been earning $15 an hour. But because they made him do something that pays more, from now on it says the farmer must now pay 19.52 an hour shuttle driver rate for all the hours that the employee works, even the 90% of the times they spend picking apples. This can increase a farmer's wage bill for that employee by 30% or more. Now here's the problem. Of course, people don't want to be taken advantage of, right? You don't want to go to work where your job is to do this, and then one day your boss comes and says, I need you to do something else, and that thing pays more, but you're doing that job that pays more, but you ain't getting that, right? That makes sense. But on the flip side, it's also adding on to the stress that that the agricultural producers are already bearing, and eventually, what's going to happen? We know right through the spirit ultimately that the system is going to collapse. But how it's going to come about is very the details of it, right? That's what we're waiting on the Lord to reveal, right? It says huge cost increase. The articles shows that as a matter of fact, this would be a good point to get to the image. So the old rule, everyone would have just been considered a farm worker, right? But now you have to break it up. You have to break up the jobs. So you may have 8 farm workers, and then 1 truck driver, and then 1 supervisor. Same thing here. If you have a big operation going on, everyone would have just been classified as a farm worker, even though there are different things being done. But now you must break it up. And when you break it up, any of these ones that are highlighted in black, if they ever do the job of the guys in green or red, they must get paid that amount. And this is just like driving up cost. And I believe, hold on, the smaller your farm is, the more impactful it is to you. That's why you see the percentage differences. All right. And so you have it to where the corporations, they really don't give a damn, right? They are winning either way. And you have, small farm owners, they're just dying off. It's getting worse and worse and worse for them. So what happens when these elites monopolizes the food industry? What happens then? I keep saying this over and over again. Hunger will be used to coerce people into taking the MOTB. Okay, I think this is pretty straightforward. Um, I hope this was specific and edifying, and I hope we are a little more, I guess, aware of how of how the Most High, we're a little more aware of how close the Most High is into what is to bringing these judgment upon Babylon, right? Because a lot of times when we think about the destruction of Esau's kingdom, we just think about the nukes, the nukes, the nukes, the nukes. But you read the book of Second Ezra, it tells you there are many things that must happen that really will cripple this place, right? And then the missiles would just be the cherry on top. Okay, so I hope this is edifying. In closing, I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Racha Kodash, Shalom Yahweh, Bashmir Shabrakatham, Toya Akim Sanakwifs, that are listening in truth and sincerity. May the blessing of that you be upon the house. And until next time, Shalom.